The HOA turned my private fire road into a toll road, until a clubhouse emergency left 11 fire engines trapped behind their own gate, exposing a mistake no amount of money could fix. Welcome back, everyone. Before today's story begins, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. If this is your first time on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll always know when a new story is released. Your support means more than you know. Every like, comment, and subscription helps this channel grow and allows us to keep sharing incredible stories with viewers around the world. And before we begin, tell me this: where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. Now, grab a comfortable seat, relax, and let's dive into today's unforgettable story. The loudest warning isn't always a siren. Sometimes it's a gate closing at exactly the wrong moment. I can still remember the smell of hot asphalt warming beneath the first light of dawn as I drove slowly along the narrow fire road my father and I had spent years maintaining. The road curved through towering pines before connecting the county highway to Ridgeview Estates, the upscale neighborhood built long after my family's ranch had already taken root in the valley. Every drainage ditch, culvert, and gravel shoulder along that road carried memories of long weekends spent repairing storm damage, clearing fallen trees, and making sure emergency vehicles could always pass without delay. It wasn't glamorous work. Most people never noticed it. That was exactly how infrastructure was supposed to be. If no one talked about the fire road, it meant it had done its job. Then I rounded the final bend. A bright yellow steel barrier stretched across the entrance where the road met the highway. Fresh concrete still surrounded the newly installed support posts, and a small toll booth stood beside the gate with polished windows reflecting the rising sun. Above everything hung a professionally printed sign: Ridgeview Estates private access, authorized users only, toll required for several seconds. I simply stared. The smell of fresh paint mixed with curing concrete drifted through my open truck window. Workers were tightening the last bolts while another crew installed surveillance cameras above the lane. None of them looked surprised to see me. One of the contractors nodded politely. "Morning. What exactly is this?" "The HOA's new access control project. My fire road." He shrugged. "We just build what we're hired to build." Before I could say another word, a white luxury SUV rolled confidently toward the gate. Patricia Monroe stepped out carrying a leather portfolio beneath one arm, dressed as though she were unveiling a luxury resort instead of blocking an emergency access route. "Good morning, Grant." I looked from the barrier back to her. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." She smiled with unmistakable satisfaction. "The Homeowners Association voted unanimously." "I didn't." "You aren't a member." "Exactly." She ignored the point completely. "This road serves our community. It crosses my property. It benefits our residents. So does the county highway." Patricia opened her portfolio and handed me several neatly organized pages. "Our new toll system will generate maintenance revenue while improving neighborhood security." I didn't even glance at the paperwork. "Who approved putting a gate across an emergency access road?" "The board." I asked who had the authority. Her smile faded slightly. "The association maintains this entrance." "No, you've maintained landscaping." I pointed toward the steel barrier. "My family built this road with the county before your subdivision existed." A brief silence settled between us. Construction workers continued tightening hardware while forklifts carried additional fencing toward the shoulder. Everything around us moved with quiet confidence, as though no one had considered the possibility that permission and ownership might be two completely different things. Several homeowners gathered near the newly finished booth, smiling as they admired the upgraded entrance. Someone even complimented Patricia on how much more exclusive the neighborhood looked with controlled access. I folded the packet she had handed me and slipped it into my truck without another word. "You'll receive an electronic transponder if you register with the HOA," Patricia called as I turned away. I paused beside the driver's door. "I've never needed permission to drive my own road." She laughed softly. "Everyone follows the new rules eventually." I started the engine and drove away without another argument. Patricia believed the shiny barrier marked the beginning of her association's newest success. She never realized it also marked the exact place where years of ignored engineering records, county agreements, and emergency access regulations would eventually collide, and where 11 fire engines would discover that a locked gate can become far more dangerous than an open road. Most people think roads belong to whoever drives on them the most. My father taught me something very different. He used to say that ownership isn't measured by tire tracks. It's measured by the names written on recorded deeds and the responsibilities people quietly accept long after everyone else forgets who built the road in the first place. My name is Grant Holloway, and for more than 20 years, I had maintained the fire road connecting County Highway 16 to Ridgeview Estates. Long before elegant homes, landscaped entrances, and homeowners association meetings became part of the valley, that narrow strip of pavement existed for one purpose alone: emergency access. When my father worked with the county decades earlier, the surrounding hills were considered a high wildfire risk. Engineers designed the routes so fire engines, ambulances, and sheriff's deputies could bypass seasonal flooding and reach isolated properties quickly. Our family donated the right-of-way while retaining ownership, and in return we accepted responsibility for routine maintenance under a recorded agreement with the county. It wasn't glamorous work. Every winter I cleared fallen branches before sunrise. Every spring I cleaned drainage culverts packed with mud and pine needles. Every summer I inspected cracked pavement before the dry season arrived. No homeowner ever thanked me. None needed to. If emergency vehicles never struggled to reach the neighborhood, the road had fulfilled its purpose. Everything began changing after Patricia Monroe became president of the Ridgeview Estates HOA. She arrived with polished presentations, ambitious improvement projects, and endless promises about increasing property values. Decorative entrance signs appeared first, then new lighting, then expensive security cameras. Residents applauded each announcement because every project seemed to make the neighborhood feel more exclusive. Patricia loved one word more than any other: control. Every board meeting seemed to introduce another policy regulating deliveries, landscaping, guest parking, or neighborhood appearance. Most of those rules never concerned me because my ranch remained completely outside the HOA boundaries, at least legally. Patricia preferred a broader definition. One afternoon, I noticed survey stakes lining both sides of the fire road near the subdivision entrance. A construction crew measured distances, while another marked utility locations with bright paint. I pulled my truck onto the shoulder. "What are you building?" The foreman checked his clipboard. "Security improvements." "On whose authorization?" "The homeowners association." I looked at the painted markings stretching directly across the emergency lane. "Did anyone contact the county engineer?" He hesitated. "I don't know." That answer stayed with me. The following morning, I drove to the County Public Works office carrying copies of the original maintenance agreement my father had preserved in a weathered filing cabinet. County engineer Melissa Carter studied the documents before opening several digital maps on her computer. She zoomed in until the fire road filled the screen. "The alignment hasn't changed." "No. The emergency designation is still active. It always has been." She leaned back thoughtfully. "If anyone plans structural changes, permits should already be here." She searched again. Nothing appeared. No applications? None. Driving home, I felt an uneasiness I couldn't quite explain. Patricia had clearly hired contractors. Survey crews had already marked the road. Yet neither the county engineer nor the transportation office had received a single permit request involving an officially designated emergency access route. 2 days later, concrete trucks arrived. Steel posts followed. By sunset, forms for a barrier foundation had already been installed across the entrance. The project was moving far faster than the paperwork. Standing beside the old roadside marker my father helped place years earlier, I watched fresh concrete being poured beneath the future gate. The workers believed they were constructing another neighborhood upgrade. Patricia believed she was creating a profitable new entrance. Neither group seemed to understand they were building directly across a road that existed for reasons far more important than convenience. And somewhere inside the county archives rested several aging documents that would eventually prove a simple truth. You can collect tolls on many roads. You should never gamble with the one designed to save lives. The easiest mistake to make is believing that silence means consent. I wasn't silent because I agreed with Patricia Monroe. I was silent because every unnecessary argument would only distract from the paper trail she was creating for herself. While the construction crew celebrated another completed project, I quietly began collecting the documents that would eventually matter far more than a polished toll booth. The morning after the gate became operational, I drove the entire length of the fire road before sunrise. A cool layer of fog settled between the pine trees, muffling every sound except the steady rumble of my truck. The barrier looked strangely out of place against the rugged landscape. Flashing indicator lights blinked above the payment terminal, and a bright electronic display instructed every driver to stop, pay, and wait for authorization before entering. This wasn't simply inconvenient. It violated the very reason the road had been built. Around 8 o'clock, I watched the first service vehicles arrive. A propane delivery truck stopped at the barrier while the driver searched for instructions. Moments later, a septic maintenance company was forced to reverse onto the highway after discovering they had not been issued access credentials. The delay lasted only a few minutes, but I found myself imagining the same delay during a medical emergency or the first minutes of a fast-moving wildfire. Minutes matter. Patricia seemed to believe they could be billed. That afternoon, I met Daniel Prescott, the attorney who had represented my family in property matters for years. We spread decades of documents across the large wooden conference table inside his office. Original property deeds, county maintenance agreements, engineering drawings, recorded right-of-way documents, emergency access designations. Daniel adjusted his reading glasses before examining the newest photographs I had taken of the toll gate. Did they request your consent? No. The county's. I checked yesterday. He nodded slowly. I suspected as much. After reviewing every page, he pulled one weathered engineering plan closer. This drawing is more important than the deed. I looked at the faded blueprint. It labels the route as a designated emergency access corridor. Exactly. He tapped a handwritten notation near the margin. No permanent obstruction may be installed without approval from both the county engineer and the fire marshal. I remembered Melissa Carter's reaction at the Public Works office. No permit applications. No engineering review. No inspection request. Nothing. Daniel leaned back in his chair. They didn't just build a toll gate. They altered protected infrastructure. The distinction changed everything. Later that evening, I drove to the County Fire Administration building with copies of every document. Deputy Fire Marshal Aaron Bishop met me in a modest conference room lined with wildfire response maps covering nearly every wall. He carefully reviewed the engineering plans before studying the photographs of the newly installed barrier. When was this completed? Yesterday. Were we notified? I couldn't find any record. Neither could he. Aaron opened the county emergency access database and entered the road identification number. Within seconds, the screen displayed the same designation my father had shown me years earlier. Primary fire apparatus access. Aaron remained silent for several moments. Finally, he looked directly at me. If those photographs are current, someone created an obstruction on a designated fire access route. Without raising his voice, he reached for the telephone and requested a complete permit history from the county records office. As he waited, I looked through the window toward the parking lot where several fire engines sat ready for deployment. Every one of them depended on roads remaining open when seconds counted. Across the valley, Patricia Monroe proudly collected toll payments beneath decorative lighting, convinced she had introduced another successful neighborhood improvement. She had no idea that, inside two separate county offices, engineers and fire officials were beginning to examine the same documents. And once they finished reading them, the argument would no longer be about HOA authority. It would become a question of public safety, legal responsibility, and why anyone thought charging admission to an emergency road was ever a good idea in the first place. Warnings only matter if someone is willing to hear them. Patricia Monroe heard everyone I sent. She simply believed authority gave her permission to ignore them. Looking back, that confidence did more damage than the steel barrier itself because every letter she dismissed became another piece of evidence showing the HOA had chosen ambition over responsibility. 3 days after my meeting with Deputy Fire Marshal Aaron Bishop, I mailed formal notices to every member of the Ridgeview Estates board. Daniel Prescott drafted each page carefully. There were no threats, emotional accusations, or dramatic language. Every paragraph cited recorded documents, engineering standards, county regulations, and the emergency access designation attached to the fire road. The conclusion was simple. Remove the toll gate voluntarily before county enforcement became necessary. Certified mail receipts confirmed every board member received the notice. No one responded. Instead, Patricia announced the toll system's successful first week in the HOA newsletter. She praised the additional revenue, promised future landscaping improvements, and thanked residents for supporting what she described as a modern access management program. She never mentioned emergency access. She never mentioned county permits. Most importantly, she never mentioned ownership. One afternoon, I drove toward the entrance after receiving a call from a local utility company. Their repair truck had been delayed at the barrier while employees tried to contact HOA security for authorization. The workers eventually gained access, but nearly 20 minutes had already passed. One technician shook his head as he packed away his equipment. If this had been a gas leak, those minutes would have mattered. I didn't answer. I simply wrote down the time, photographed the truck waiting beside the gate, and added another entry to the growing file inside my truck. Everything was documented. Dates, times, vehicle numbers, conversations, photographs. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Later that week, Melissa Carter invited me back to the county engineering office. Large construction drawings covered the conference table, while several transportation specialists reviewed digital overlays comparing the original emergency access plans with recent aerial imagery. Melissa pointed toward the newest satellite photograph. The gate wasn't part of any approved design. No, the camera poles weren't either. She circled the entrance with a red marker. Neither was the toll booth. Another engineer quietly added something to the inspection report before speaking. This isn't just a maintenance upgrade. What is it? A permanent obstruction. The phrase carried more weight than I expected. Across the room, another employee printed copies of historical inspection records showing the fire road had passed emergency compliance reviews every year for nearly 2 decades without modification. Until now. Before leaving, Melissa handed me a copy of the preliminary engineering findings. We're forwarding this to the fire marshal. I appreciate it. Don't thank us yet. She looked directly at the photographs of the barrier. I hope we're acting before someone needs that road. Those words stayed with me long after I drove home. That evening, the valley settled into its usual quiet rhythm. The breeze carried the scent of pine through the open windows while distant porch lights appeared across Ridgeview Estates. Families gathered inside the clubhouse for another neighborhood social event, completely unaware that county officials had already begun coordinating a joint inspection of the entrance road. Patricia celebrated another profitable weekend. Residents praised the improved security. The toll booth attendant collected another stack of access fees. Everything appeared normal. But beneath that calm surface, engineers, fire officials, and legal records were steadily converging toward the same conclusion. The gate hadn't merely slowed traffic. It had transformed a legally protected emergency corridor into a privately controlled checkpoint. No wildfire had started. No medical emergency had occurred. No fire engines had yet approached the barrier. Everyone still believed there was plenty of time. None of us knew that the real test of Patricia's decision would arrive sooner than anyone imagined. And when it did, no amount of collected tolls would persuade an emergency to wait patiently at a locked gate. Preparation doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like another quiet afternoon spent reading faded engineering drawings, while everyone else celebrates a decision that hasn't been tested yet. After the county engineer completed her preliminary review, I resisted every temptation to force a confrontation. Patricia Monroe expected an argument. Instead, I gave her something much more dangerous. Time. Every additional day the toll gate remained in operation created another record showing the HOA had ignored repeated warnings from people responsible for public safety. Daniel Prescott and I continued assembling the timeline. Certified letters, county correspondence, engineering reports, photographs taken before and after construction, permit searches showing nothing had ever been filed. Everything fit together with uncomfortable precision. One Friday morning, Deputy Fire Marshal Aaron Bishop invited us to attend a coordination meeting with county emergency planning officials. The conference room overlooked the apparatus yard where fire engines stood ready beneath bright red bay doors. Large response maps covered an entire wall, each one identifying evacuation routes, hydrant locations, and emergency access corridors throughout the valley. Aaron projected an aerial image of the fire road onto the screen. "This route," he said, pointing toward the narrow strip of pavement crossing my property, "serves as the primary apparatus access for Ridgeview Estates." Several officials nodded. Melissa Carter placed another document beside the map. Our inspection confirmed an unauthorized barrier and permanent gate structure. A transportation supervisor added quietly, "No permits." Another engineer answered, "No design review." Aaron looked around the room. "And no approval from this office." Nobody argued. The facts required no interpretation. Before the meeting ended, Aaron scheduled a formal joint inspection for the following week. Notices would be delivered to the HOA requesting access to review the newly installed gate, emergency clearance dimensions, override systems, and operational procedures. As we walked toward the parking lot afterward, Daniel folded his notebook. "They're giving Patricia every opportunity. I know. If she cooperates, this ends quietly. And if she doesn't?" He looked back toward the fire station. "Then someone else makes the decision." That weekend, Ridgeview Estates hosted a community summer festival at the clubhouse. Families gathered beneath colorful tents while children played games across the lawn. Live music echoed through the valley, and food trucks lined the parking area near the entrance road. Driving past the celebration, I noticed something almost surreal. The HOA had decorated the toll booth with flower baskets and banners welcoming visitors. Residents complimented Patricia on her latest improvement. Several happily paid the access fee without asking where the money was going. None of them knew county officials had already classified the barrier as an unapproved obstruction pending inspection. Later that evening, I parked near the ridge overlooking the valley. From there I could see the winding fire road disappearing beneath tall pines before reaching the subdivision entrance. The flashing lights above the toll gate glowed softly against the gathering darkness. It looked impressive, modern, efficient. Appearances can be persuasive. Reality usually wins. Just after sunset, my phone rang. Aaron Bishop, I wanted to give you a courtesy update. I'm listening. The HOA acknowledged receiving our inspection notice. Good. They also informed us the gate complies with every safety requirement. I looked toward the blinking barrier far below. Did they provide documentation? A brief pause followed. No. That single word said everything. After ending the call, I remained on the ridge for several minutes, watching headlights stop briefly at the toll booth before continuing toward the neighborhood. Vehicle after vehicle passed without incident. Everything seemed perfectly normal. That was the dangerous part. Disasters rarely announce themselves before they happen. They wait quietly behind ordinary routines until one unexpected moment exposes every shortcut, every ignored warning, and every decision made without understanding why the original rules existed. As I drove home beneath a sky filled with stars, I couldn't shake one thought. The fire road had never been built for ordinary days. It had been built for the single day when ordinary would suddenly disappear. The night every warning became reality began with a smell that every firefighter recognizes before anyone else notices danger. I was sitting on my back porch just after dusk when the faint scent of burning electrical insulation drifted across the valley. At first it was barely noticeable beneath the familiar aroma of pine, trees warming after another dry summer day. Then the wind shifted. Within seconds, the distant glow beyond the tree line turned from orange sunset into something far more unsettling. I stood immediately. From the ridge above my ranch, I had a clear view toward Ridgeview Estates. Thin gray smoke curled above the clubhouse roof before thickening into a dark column climbing steadily into the evening sky. Someone dialed 911 almost instantly. Within minutes, the valley echoed with the unmistakable sound of approaching sirens. One engine, then another, then another. Red emergency lights reflected against the surrounding hills as fire apparatus streamed from neighboring stations. Because Ridgeview Estates had expanded over the years, the county dispatched a full structural response assignment. 11 fire engines. Exactly the type of response the fire road had been designed to support decades earlier. I drove toward the entrance while keeping safely clear of emergency operations. Long before I reached the toll gate, I could already see flashing lights stacking along County Highway 16. The barrier was down. The payment system still blinked patiently above the lane. A security attendant stood inside the booth looking completely overwhelmed. The first arriving engine stopped only a few feet from the steel arm. Its driver leaned on the air horn. Nothing happened. Another firefighter jumped from the cab and shouted toward the booth. "We need the gate open now." The attendant searched frantically through drawers before picking up a telephone. I don't know the emergency override. More engines arrived behind the first. Then more. Within moments, 11 fire engines stretched down the highway in a line of flashing red lights that seemed almost endless. Deputy Fire Marshal Aaron Bishop stepped from the lead command vehicle. One glance told him everything. His eyes moved from the burning clubhouse in the distance to the locked barriers standing between emergency crews and the fastest access route. "Who authorized this gate?" he demanded. Nobody answered immediately. Patricia Monroe came running from the clubhouse side of the entrance, her expression completely different from the confident smile she had worn during the ribbon-cutting ceremony only weeks earlier. "We have access cards." Aaron didn't even look at her. I asked who authorized placing a controlled barrier across a designated emergency access road. Smoke continued rising behind her. Firefighters had already begun discussing alternate routes over the radio, but everyone knew those roads were longer, narrower, and less suitable for heavy apparatus. Every passing minute mattered. Aaron turned toward one of his captains. "Cut it." The firefighter hesitated only long enough to confirm the order. Within seconds, a rescue truck rolled forward carrying hydraulic cutting equipment. The sound of metal screaming against hardened steel echoed across the valley as sparks showered onto the pavement. Residents watched silently. Some covered their mouths. Others stared at Patricia with growing disbelief. The barrier finally collapsed sideways onto the shoulder. One after another, the engines accelerated through the opening and disappeared toward the clubhouse. Aaron remained beside the shattered gate. He looked at Patricia only once. This scene is now part of an official investigation. No anger, no raised voice, only quiet certainty. Standing beside my truck, I remembered every warning letter, every engineering report, every unanswered notice, and every conversation that could have prevented this moment. None of them had mattered until the first emergency arrived. The fire itself would eventually be extinguished. The damage to the clubhouse could be repaired. What could never be undone was the fact that an unauthorized toll gate had delayed emergency responders on a legally protected fire road. And every flashing light disappearing into the smoke carried another witness to a mistake that county investigators would soon document in extraordinary detail. The fire was contained before midnight. The investigation was only beginning. Long after the last flames disappeared beneath thousands of gallons of water, the brightest lights at Ridgeview Estates no longer came from fire engines. They came from county inspection vehicles, emergency management trucks, and investigators documenting every detail surrounding the delay that had unfolded at the entrance gate. I arrived just after sunrise. The air still carried the sharp scent of wet ash mixed with soaked timber. Thin ribbons of steam drifted from the clubhouse roof, while yellow safety tape surrounded the damaged structure. Firefighters packed hoses into engine compartments with the quiet efficiency that always follows a long night. The broken toll gate still lay twisted beside the road exactly where hydraulic rescue tools had dropped it. No one had moved it. Deputy Fire Marshal Aaron Bishop stood beside several county officials reviewing photographs on a tablet computer. Melissa Carter joined him carrying rolled engineering drawings beneath one arm. When they saw me approaching, Aaron nodded. "We've completed the preliminary scene documentation." And he looked toward the destroyed barrier. "The delay is officially part of the incident record." Those words carried enormous weight. Nearby, investigators measured distances from the former gate location to the highway while another team photographed the concrete foundations supporting the toll booth. Every bolt, every electrical connection, every access control device became evidence. Patricia Monroe stood several yards away with the HOA attorney she had hired only hours earlier. She looked exhausted. Gone was the polished confidence that had accompanied every board meeting. Instead, she quietly watched investigators place numbered evidence markers around what had once been her newest neighborhood improvement. The attorney approached Aaron first. "My client would like clarification regarding the inspection." Aaron remained professional. "Everything will be included in the official report. We're concerned about liability." Aaron answered without hesitation. That concern should have existed before the obstruction was installed. No anger. No sarcasm. Only facts. Meanwhile, Melissa spread historical engineering plans across the hood of a county truck. Several inspectors gathered around as she compared the original fire road design with recent aerial photographs showing the barrier, toll booth, camera poles, and concrete islands added by the HOA. Every unauthorized change appeared in bright red annotation. She turned one page toward Patricia. "Can you provide the approved construction permit?" Silence. "The engineering review?" More silence. "The fire marshal's authorization?" The attorney quietly lowered his eyes. There wasn't one. By late morning, county surveyors located the original reference monuments my father had helped install decades earlier. Their measurements confirmed what every historical record had already shown. The fire road remained exactly where it had always been. The HOA had simply decided to treat it as their own. Residents slowly gathered near the entrance throughout the morning. Many looked genuinely shocked while reading copies of the preliminary inspection notice posted beside the damaged gate. One homeowner approached me carefully. "I thought the HOA owned all of this." So did a lot of people. He looked toward the investigators. "I guess nobody ever checked." That sentence summed up the entire story. Nobody had checked the deeds. Nobody had checked the engineering records. Nobody had checked the emergency access designation. Everyone simply trusted assumptions until reality demanded documentation. Before leaving the scene, Aaron handed Daniel Prescott a formal copy of the county's emergency preservation order. The remaining portions of the toll system would stay untouched until investigators completed their review. No repairs, no reconstruction, no replacement. Everything would remain exactly as it stood. As the afternoon sun broke through lingering smoke, I looked once more at the shattered steel barrier lying beside the road. Only a week earlier it had symbolized Patricia's confidence that authority could override ownership. Now it had become something entirely different. A silent reminder that public safety is never improved by ignoring the people who built the system in the first place. The fire had exposed more than damaged walls. It had exposed every shortcut, every ignored warning, and every decision made without understanding why that quiet road had existed long before the neighborhood ever imagined placing a price on using it. Real accountability begins the moment excuses stop working. For Patricia Monroe, that moment arrived less than 24 hours after the fire, when the county transformed its preliminary investigation into formal enforcement. The flames had damaged part of the Ridgeview Estates clubhouse, but the greater damage now lay inside meeting rooms, engineering reports, and legal files where every decision leading to that night was being examined line by line. Early Monday morning, Daniel Prescott called before I had finished my first cup of coffee. The county released its initial findings. How bad? Worse than anyone expected. An hour later we met inside the county administration building. Representatives from the fire marshal's office, public works, emergency management, and county legal counsel filled the conference room. Stacks of photographs, engineering plans, and inspection reports covered the long oak table. Deputy Fire Marshal Aaron Bishop began the meeting. The fire itself remains under separate investigation. He paused before continuing. The obstruction of the designated emergency access route does not. Melissa Carter projected aerial photographs onto a large screen. One image showed the original fire road exactly as county engineers had approved it years earlier. The next displayed the same location after the HOA installed the toll booth, steel barrier, camera poles, and concrete islands. Every unauthorized addition appeared highlighted. No one disputed the comparison. County legal counsel summarized the documentation. No construction permit. No engineering approval. No fire marshal authorization. No operational emergency override reviewed by county agencies. Every missing requirement strengthened the same conclusion. The toll gate had never been lawfully authorized. Patricia sat quietly beside her attorney. The confidence she once carried into every HOA meeting had disappeared beneath stacks of official reports. Several board members avoided looking toward her altogether. Daniel leaned toward me. They're not debating ownership anymore. He was right. Ownership had already been established through recorded deeds and county agreements. Now the discussion centered on responsibility. Aaron continued calmly. The delay experienced by responding apparatus has been documented as part of the official incident timeline. No dramatic language. No accusations. Only facts supported by records. Following a short recess, county officials presented a corrective action order requiring immediate removal of every remaining component of the toll system. The damaged barrier would not simply remain dismantled. It would be permanently removed. All associated control equipment, payment devices, decorative fencing, and concrete islands interfering with emergency operations would also be taken out under county supervision. The HOA attorney quietly requested additional time. County counsel answered politely. The public safety issue has already waited long enough. Outside the meeting room, several Ridgeview Estates homeowners gathered after hearing portions of the proceedings. Many appeared genuinely frustrated, not because the gate was coming down, but because they had never been told the fire road carried a protected emergency designation. One resident approached me. We thought the tolls were paying for maintenance. I've maintained that road for years. His expression changed immediately. No one told us. I know. That answer seemed to trouble him more than anything else. Later that afternoon, heavy construction equipment arrived at the entrance under county authorization. Workers disconnected electrical service before removing surveillance cameras and dismantling the remaining sections of the toll booth piece by piece. Residents watched silently from the sidewalk. No ribbon-cutting ceremony marked its removal. No applause followed. Only the steady sound of machinery undoing a project that should never have been built. As the final concrete foundation was broken apart, I noticed the original pavement emerging beneath years of unnecessary additions. The old fire road looked almost unchanged. It had simply been hidden beneath someone's ambition. Standing beside the cleared entrance, Aaron folded the final inspection notice and handed me a copy for my records. The road is operational again. I looked down the familiar stretch of pavement disappearing between the pines. It looked exactly the way my father always intended. Simple, open, ready when people needed it most. Sometimes justice isn't about creating something new. Sometimes it's about removing everything that never belonged there in the first place. People often ask whether I ever regretted refusing to stay quiet. The answer has never changed. I don't regret speaking up. I would have regretted saying nothing while a road built to save lives slowly became a source of unnecessary risk. Looking back now, months after everything was resolved, I realized the story was never really about a toll gate. It was about forgetting why certain things exist in the first place. The county completed its investigation several weeks after the Clubhouse fire. The final report confirmed every major finding that inspectors had already discussed during the preliminary review. The unauthorized toll system had altered a designated emergency access corridor without the required approvals, and the delay encountered by responding fire apparatus became part of the documented incident timeline. Corrective orders remained in place until every unauthorized structure had been removed and the fire road was restored to its original approved condition. Ridgeview Estates changed in quiet ways after that. The damaged clubhouse was repaired over the following months, but the entrance looked very different. The toll booth disappeared. The decorative fencing surrounding it was gone. Surveillance poles came down. Fresh pavement covered the areas where concrete foundations had been broken apart, leaving only a simple roadway stretching between the county highway and the neighborhood exactly as the original engineers had intended. Traffic flowed naturally again. Fire engines could pass without stopping. Ambulances no longer depended on key cards, payment terminals, or security attendants trying to remember emergency procedures. The road had returned to being invisible. That was its greatest success. Patricia Monroe resigned before the HOA board completed its internal review. A new group of directors took over and adopted a very different approach. Before approving any future construction affecting common infrastructure, they required written verification from county agencies, engineers, and legal counsel. The expensive lesson became a permanent policy. One afternoon, the new board president asked whether I would meet with several residents beside the restored entrance. I agreed. Standing near the old roadside marker my father had installed decades earlier, we talked less about lawsuits and investigations than about responsibility. One homeowner looked down the road, disappearing through the pine trees. I drove this every day for 12 years. So did everyone else. I never wondered who built it. I smiled. That's because it always worked. He nodded thoughtfully. I guess we only notice infrastructure after something goes wrong. Exactly. A few weeks later, Deputy Fire Marshal Aaron Bishop invited me to observe a scheduled emergency response exercise. Multiple fire engines entered Ridgeview Estates using the same fire road that had once been blocked by the barrier. No delays. No stopping. No confusion. The engines moved smoothly through the entrance before positioning around the clubhouse in only a matter of minutes. Aaron watched the final apparatus roll past before speaking. This is how it's supposed to look. I couldn't have said it better. As the exercise ended, I remained beside the roadside for several minutes listening to the fading sound of diesel engines disappearing into the valley. The road itself looked ordinary once again. Weathered pavement, white edge lines, tall pines swaying gently above the shoulders. Nothing about it suggested headlines or investigations. That was exactly the point. My father often reminded me that the most important things are usually the ones people never notice until they're missing. He built that fire road so firefighters would never waste precious minutes reaching families who needed help. He never imagined someone would someday install a toll gate across it. Yet he also taught me another lesson that stayed with me long after the investigation ended. Ownership carries responsibility. Authority carries accountability. And public safety should never become a business opportunity. Whenever I drive that familiar stretch of pavement now, I don't think about the barrier that once stood there. I think about 11 fire engines finally reaching the people they were sent to protect. Because justice isn't measured by the gate that came down. It's measured by the road that remained open afterward. Exactly as it should have been from the very beginning.